whole 9 years after its predecessor, the Pikmin series' third installment would grace a console nobody owned. Luckily, the game would receive the Deluxe treatment as an enhanced port for Nintendo Switch in 2020, the version for which this analysis will be based. However, I will discuss any noteworthy differences on Wii U. When the planet Kopai suffers from a food shortage due to mismanagement, scout ships called Sparrows are sent into the universe to discover edible matter, but only the Pikmin world returns positive, a planet now officially called PNF 404, and so 3 explorers set out to retrieve enough fruit to save Kopai: Captain Charlie, botanist Brittany, and engineer Alf. As their ship, the SS Drake, enters PNF 404's atmosphere, the trio are separated in a crash landing, and what's worse, the cosmic drive key needed to go home is lost. With help from Pikmin, the explorers are reunited and learn from some peculiar data files that Hakotatians are also in the area on another treasure hunt, and that Captain Olimar is in possession of the cosmic drive key. After tracking a nearby signal, an unconscious Louie is mistakenly brought back to the ship, who upon waking up steals the Kopite's food supply and flees. The trio quickly detain and interrogate Louis for the real Olimar's whereabouts, which leads them to Formidable Oak, where he is held captive by a mysterious life form called the Plasm Wraith. One long final battle later, Olimar is rescued, who returns the cosmic drive key and apologizes for his subordinates' bad behavior. With hopefully enough fruit and their essential ship part recovered, the Kopites say goodbye to the Pikmin, taking themselves and the Hakotatians home. Pikmin 3 seeks to combine what works about previous titles and fix what doesn't. Caves are integrated into the larger levels with no separate rules, and the purple game breakers from Pikmin 2 have been axed. The campaign is more linear than ever, with areas that are initially compartmentalized gradually expanding and interconnecting through progression. Any chance to relive the adventure is a treat, but it's not as replayable or open to experimentation compared to past outings, since no matter how much game knowledge players have, they'll still be restricted in accordance with the story. The addition of a third controllable character presents overwhelming opportunity for multitasking, and unlike Pikmin 2, there are many scenarios outside of the forced separations at the beginning where multiple explorers are necessary or useful, partially because they can now be thrown to reach otherwise inaccessible places, and more importantly the new Go Here function, which allows sending explorers anywhere available on the map. While game-changing in practiced hands, it is unlikely that players will know how to optimize this feature until they become familiar with the level structure. I remember trying to split up only to be met with impassable roads or puzzles forcing me to regroup. Other drawbacks to Go Here are that it will sometimes pick an unideal route with no way to course correct, and for some reason is unavailable to those riding Twilight River's lily pads. The Fog of War mechanic hides map information, leaving me guessing what to prioritize and bring into the field. Because efficiency is the best approach again, part of me wants the map to show every last detail so I can make perfect plans, but I suppose that would detract from the explorative aspect where such things must be discovered in person. The Cop Pad and other menus contain pages and pages of information for the benefit of players and Pikmin fans, which, depending on when they are read, plainly spoil things not yet encountered. This deluxe version includes the Piclopedia along with entries from each character, minus the freedom to observe and interact with the creatures, so it's not as entertaining. There's a surprising amount of talking throughout, and the end-of-day results can take a while to skip because of this and the many data screens, though I do love the replay option so I can watch back how I did and potentially hone my strategy. Pikmin 3 Deluxe finally introduces co-op to the main campaign, and it's as glorious as I expected. Divvying up tasks and planning on the fly with each other creates a wonderful team dynamic that's relaxed but focused and goal-oriented. Unfortunately, there's no convenient way to distribute units, so combat can easily devolve into one person hogging everybody while the other runs around looking for a chance to contribute. Aside from this and minor annoyances like constantly pausing to use the map, taking control away to throw a teammate's character, and being forced to share the same game settings, there's no real downside to co-op, so unless someone's partner is incompetent, multiplayer is straight up advantageous, which I'd take more issue with if the game wasn't such a cakewalk. This baby difficulty is the most concerning aspect of Pikmin 3's campaign. It's heavily tutorial ridden and stops the action more than needed to explain obvious happenings. By default, the game offers buttloads of hints giving away exactly what to do, as well as these annoying blue markers leading me to the next place of interest. There is no need for this. The narrow level design does a perfectly fine job pointing me in the right direction. I suppose I should be grateful that most of this stuff can be turned off, and I suggest doing so immediately and permanently for a better experience. I mean, heaven forbid I have to think for myself, Nintendo. Suit upgrades do return as hidden treasure, but the hazards they protect against are not common or threatening enough to make their resistances matter. Where the first two games can be cutthroat, Pikmin 3 is incredibly lenient on what does or doesn't kill. I'm not too bothered by this, as I don't believe the survival of captains or their squad to be the core challenge here. However, I do miss the intensity of dangerous encounters where I knew mistakes could really cost me, causing me to improve my skills. I never saw a need for the new hide mechanic when I could comfortably overwhelm my prey with or without cover. Not even the ultra spicy difficulty setting quite manages to hit my sweet spot because it reduces the maximum number of field units from 100 to 60, which while technically harder ruins the fun factor of more productivity and hinders my ability to allocate sufficient troops when splitting into groups, something that's egregious in co-op. Each nectar can now only be drunk by 10 units. Sprouts will no longer revert back to leaves if left in the ground for too long, yet even with the relative scarcity of nectar here, I still don't bother evolving them this way since Spicy Spray now also matures Pikmin, as well as other reasons I gave in Pikmin 1's video. Especially in Deluxe, the difference between leaf and flower units isn't pronounced enough to make the process worth it anyway. I'm never too quick to knock games for being too hard or easy, however after extensive analysis I fear Pikmin 3 may have overcorrected from the past game's extreme difficulties. Too many mechanics don't have much impact or consequence due to their forgiving nature, but at least nothing is broken like Pikmin 2. Well, aside from these little devils. And as for Pikmin types, the primary colored classics return with their staple abilities intact, except blues cannot act as lifeguards and yellows can dig faster, though there seems to be greater focus on the newcomers. Purple and white have been replaced by rock and winged, with the former able to break crystal and resist being crushed, and the latter can lift pink objects and fly spoils across the map. Rock Pikmin can't latch onto enemies, but their impact damage is so high that they kind of outclass Red's fighter status, and the way winged Pikmin can cross water, charge flying targets, reach elevated treasure, and ignore regular carrying routes undermine several type advantages, making them the best by far, even broken in some cases, like these elaborate sequences where 2 or more captains are supposed to work together to reach treasure, or one could just forcibly send winged Pikmin, skipping the whole puzzle. They honestly should have been the last obtained because they're so much more useful than blues. Despite this hierarchy, the cast is better balanced than before and every type gets their moments. Pikmin 3 thankfully reintroduces a time limit in the form of the juice system, where fruit must continually be collected to keep the explorers fed at the end of each day to prevent starvation. I sang the praises of Pikmin 1's 30-day limit, but I can understand why such a drastic lose condition could be too stressful. What's important is the pressure to act, so if that can be created without scaring or overwhelming anybody, that's a good thing. Under the juice system, time is earned rather than taken, giving players a sense that they're in control. The only points where I don't enjoy it is in boss fights, which require all my attention anyway, so the last thing I want is a timer breathing down my neck. Sometimes attack windows get cut short by damage caps in order to kick off subsequent phases, which is already annoying but doubly so when I'm in a rush and have to wait for another opening. That said, defeating bosses and acquiring gigantic fruits that generate a ton of juice brings satisfying peace of mind, and the campaign will yank the rug out from under players when their supply is temporarily drained by Louis midway through, and when keeping Olimar away from the Plasm Wraith, which are natural ways to bring back stress. However, despite food being the Kopite's reason for coming to PNF 404, progression is instead dictated by whatever the current story objective is, so the goal of accumulating provisions is really just a means to continue playing, and with practically no chance of running out of juice on easier difficulties, fruit are devalued. I prefer when the main collectibles are in charge of progress, making them top priority and not just an occasional buffer. Here I'm encouraged to speedrun the story rather than craft and execute efficient fruit gathering strategies, leaving significant portions of the maps unexplored, which seems rather wasteful. Their importance is also undermined by balancing issues. Different fruit yield certain amounts of juice, so one would think that larger, riskier fruits should produce more. However, some reward a disproportionate amount relative to each other and the time or effort in getting them. I found out later that there are 4 different ending narrations depending on how much fruit has been obtained, and if these were treated as full-on good or bad endings like Pikmin 1, I think the system might have had better incentive. Pikmin AI has improved exponentially, from quick obedience, massive grab and throw ranges, engaging only with what is commanded, uncomfortably tight formations, and sidestepping water when walking along its edge. Those involved in a task must be whistled longer or twice, so that idle Pikmin nearby can be called with no disruptions. They're independent enough to collect and return to clusters of items, but still need a leader to be effective in battle and such. I think I can finally say that Pikmin do act in competent and convenient ways that should meet most expectations, striking a great balance between self-sufficiency and reliance, and are satisfactorily responsive to feel like an extension of my character. Predictably, however, it's still far from perfect. Pikmin continue to get stuck on things and give up on a job if they don't find available space in time. Late squad members who fail to accompany explorers onto lily pads will stand helpless. Carriers can take unnecessarily long roads back to base, to the point where I wish I could see their route to clear the way, or better yet, choose their route. And although inconsistent, I have seen abandoned spoils obstruct carriers' paths. If they are interrupted during assembly lines of grapes, gold nuggets, or bridge pieces, these will poof into thin air, forcing a return to spawn point. Pikmin will also return to the gathering site after all pieces have been transported instead of at a finished bridge or at base like every other collectible, so I have to try and intercept them on their way back for more. Throwing still doesn't match the top speed of my inputs. The new lock-on doesn't always snap to the intended target, and this is a big problem since there can be so many to choose from. Gone is the swarm ability from past games, essentially replaced by a charge move and dodge maneuvers left or right. In Deluxe, charging only sends the current type and minimum amount required to carry things, so as to not engage with unwanted Pikmin. Sometimes my repeated charging inexplicably fails to register for a few seconds, or my army utterly misses the mark. All of this can mean matching the button a lot to send greater numbers or override unsuccessful charges, and I do wish there was an option to send the entire squad by holding down the input, but overall it's a good system. The main thing I miss about swarming, aside from being fun to use, is its ability to subtly influence units' positioning at all times, because with dodge rolling being dependent on camera orientation and mapped to the D-pad, it demands going out of one's way to use properly, and I often forget it's there. The different control schemes are appreciated but definitely not created equal. Co-op in handheld mode dips performance. The single Joy-Con setup lacks camera input, removes dodging, and splits menu access between the players. Even when using Wii Remote and Nunchuck, Wii U owners have to interact with the gamepad for cop pad functions, and stylus controls, exist. Despite the disappointing 720p resolution, the game manages to look stunningly beautiful and naturalistic, impressive given its original hardware. The rippling of water, the shines, reflections, and slight swaying of foliage are amazing to watch. There are so many visual indicators to convey what's happening. Targets will briefly highlight blue if touched by the cursor. The throw arc line assists with precision and is colored to match the Pikmin type currently equipped. After some exploration, the map helps identify tasks and obstacles, though it could have done better at hinting which Pikmin will be needed for things. I don't find the soundtrack as catchy, but the exotic high-quality instrumentation is wonderful on the ears. While the Wii U version is generally lacking with less extras, less quality of life features, and no story mode co-op, it does present a few interesting talking points. I find IR aiming much more reliable than the Switch's gyro, which I'm constantly switching on and off depending on how tired I get of recalibrating. And as someone who gets turned around in these winding levels, I appreciate how the gamepad lets me see myself on a detailed map in real time, as opposed to the less helpful mini-map on Switch. I'm not a fan of Deluxe's action menu due to the two-step process of holding Y plus a direction and how it constantly rearranges the captains, versus Wii U where these actions have single reliable inputs. It could be argued that Deluxe's lock-on and charge modifications cross a line of being too convenient, as well as the full whistle radius, which is so large now it might as well cover the whole screen. They remove most of the aiming and mental math, which contributed to a more deliberate and methodical gaming experience, turning Deluxe comparatively fast, wild, and frantic. But since I enjoy that speed, I welcome these features. Lock-on in particular when playing without motion controls because it lets me command and run around simultaneously, which was my concern with the old classic controls. I guess that just leaves the side content. I'm not big on meaningless checklists like the achievement-style badges, though thankfully most of these are pretty reasonable. The ones that gave me trouble were Hakutation Hound and Legendary Archaeologist, which requires getting all 120 exploration notes and snapping photos of 15 hidden murals in the campaign. I hadn't seen a single mural in any of my playthroughs, so I didn't take long to consult the internet. If people are to have any hope of finding these alone, the game really should have allowed free movement in photo mode among other aids because they're extremely hard to spot normally. The rules of Bingo Battle are similar to Pikmin 2's battle mode, except instead of marbles, players fight to collect stuff that'll score them a bingo. It does give an option for 2 captains per person, though the omission of Go Here lessens the appeal. Between the more dynamic levels, enemies, and items, this is an excellent blend of skill and luck, with enough wildcards to keep matches unpredictable. Mission and side stories basically amount to the same thing, gathering or killing everything as fast as possible to earn medals under solo or co-op categories, with platinum medals probably posing the stiffest challenges out of any Pikmin game, and this time it mostly feels fair. Olimar's comeback has a few special objectives like sprouting 100 Pikmin, taking a ship part through a gauntlet of obstacles, or reuniting the captains, and a handful of missions toy with unique elements like slides, conveyor belts, a semi-2D perspective, saving Louie, and the returning white and purple Pikmin mainly used for their speed and weight capacity respectively, but the majority of missions shamelessly reuse familiar areas, merely remixing treasure and enemy placements, with the redrawn boundaries making it obvious which levels weren't designed for this mode. Even so, most stages offer a satisfying test where mechanics and strategies are heavily enforced compared to story mode with stricter resource management and teamwork, though I'd be lying if I said I wasn't burned out from the stress and overused music after doing them back to back. No matter how flawless my method is, I still have to contend with some inevitable snags due to lapses in Pikmin or enemy AI, fighting to lock onto the correct target or fumbling the action menu. I like what these modes bring to the table, but by and large I think their content needs trimming and/or originality. Pikmin 3 is all about the little improvements, and those included in Deluxe make it the definitive version in my eyes. The game's extended development was put to good use, as this is by far the most balanced, beautiful, complex yet user-friendly, well-designed and polished mainline entry to date, though I am still partial to the original as my favorite. To me, this trilogy mirrors the stages of Pikmin evolution. The first is an underdeveloped specimen full of potential, the second is the weird middle child, and the third represents the series in full bloom. Like the Pikmin themselves, nature is a sacred resource. It's there for our benefit, yet we have a responsibility to use it wisely and respectfully, and this divine relationship is demonstrated so elegantly through the combination of a few simple game concepts. Nintendo has always excelled at diversifying their library, but this franchise is out of this world, and I am beyond thrilled for its revival following another agonizing 10 years of dormancy with Pikmin 4. If this series continues to get half the love that was poured into Pikmin 3, the future is in very good hands.